Hello, this is Alex Ramsey, host of Night of the Batman, and I'm here today to review Batman the Killing Joke by Alan Moore with artwork by Brian Boland. Now, every so often there comes along a story or some sort of, usually just like a story or an idea in a comic or in any sort of media anywhere that makes you look at a character that you either thought you knew or makes you see a character you thought you knew in a different way, in a way you never would have thought to see them before, and sheds new light on them that you never would have thought would be possible with that certain character. And there also are stories that come along that change our perceptions of certain characters and change how they're characterized, and also inform later versions of the same character in other stories. This is one of those stories. Batman Killing Joke was one of the primary stories that informed later characterizations of the Joker in comics and also in other media. One of the main ones that I can just think of right now, Tim Burton, while the Joker in his movie is not exactly the one from the comics, it's sort of Jack Nicholson as the Joker. You could definitely see in some of the scenes in this, particularly the one where the accident happens, that it looks like he took the panels of those especially the scene where the Joker gets his face turned white and basically has the accident, because that looks very much like some of the comic book panels, and I think it goes into Access Chemicals, which is again something from the comics, which I thought was cool. And even though it's not really in character-wise, it didn't inform him that much, because that's not really, not to be harsh, but that's not really what those stories are about. It definitely did in the Dark Knight movie, with the Joker having, for instance, one of them I could think of is that the Joker in this has multiple origin stories. He doesn't have like a particularly set one, which is what I think the Batman movies did wrong, is to give Joker a set origin, that it's his indefinite origin. I think I like this much more, that it's sort of a mystery that he makes up a new one every time, just like he does several times in the Dark Knight movie, when he asks the person, you want to know how I got these scars, and he comes up with a new story every time. And whether there's truth in that story or not is sort of left up to the reader. And it's just sort of interesting to think about. Particularly also, the Joker even takes certain cues, especially in his ideology and how he thinks about the world. In this story, he thinks that one bad day can change a sane person crazy and change their life. And the Dark Knight, he has a similar philosophy where he thinks that everyone is the same and all they need is just one push to make them go crazy. And in both these, which I found interesting, I think Nolan might have paraphrased and sort of taken the scene from this to inform the final scene in the Dark Knight movie. In both these versions, Batman says you're alone, even though in a way, I think at least, that Batman, that one bad day did change him, and whether he's crazy or sane is sort of left up to the viewer slash reader in this, which I also like. I think that's really cool and sort of a cool interpretation, and it actually really makes sense if you take a step back and sort of look at it as a whole. Another interesting fact is that in this story, Barbara Gordon is paralyzed. She hadn't become Oracle yet, but in this story, she was paralyzed as part of Joker's means of targeting Gordon and trying to drive him crazy. And this was actually published before the events of Death in the Family, which I just find interesting that in that particular era that Joker wasn't just sticking to his normal just like crimes and attacking random people that Batman didn't know. He was going after people that Batman knew and attacking him on a personal level, which I find very sadistic and also just like a darker shade of the Joker that people hadn't seen at that point. He never come after the sidekicks or anything. He more just like stick to random people. It made it sort of unsettling that he would come after people that Batman knew, and that there was basically, after that point, there was no line that the Joker wouldn't cross in order to try and get a rise out of either Batman or whoever he was targeting at that point. Also, I'll get more to this in the prose, but I also like how this gives the Joker a sympathetic but not necessarily confirmed backstory. He could have just made that up. We don't know. And another thing I want to mention before I move on to the summary and the pros and cons is what I find really interesting is that Alan Moore doesn't really look back on this story with that much fondness, or he even has gone so far as to call this a bad story that he's written. I guess his explanation, though, was that it was with registered characters and that it didn't really deal with anything human, and that it was more just, it wasn't that it was a bad story necessarily, it was just that it was bad in his mind compared to stuff that he tries to accomplish with his writing, and he thinks he didn't accomplish that with his writing, and that there's really not much to this story. I respectfully disagree, and I'll get to that in the pros and cons. I guess I'll start off with a quick summary before we move into the actual reviewing process. Okay, I guess I'll start with the summary. So this opens up with Batman arriving at Arkham Asylum, and it's silent, which is, I think it's really interesting. It makes you focus more on the art, and it's kind of cinematic. You kind of imagine some spooky music or some dramatic music playing in the background as this is happening. Usually in the beginning of a comic there's words. I find it interesting. There's no words in this at the beginning anyway. And so he goes and he's going to meet and talk to the Joker, and he starts this conversation with him about how eventually, if not sooner than later, he knows that it will come to a boiling point eventually, and that one of them will kill the other, or they'll both kill each other. And he doesn't want that to happen. He's trying his best to try and reason with the Joker to stop this course before it ends and one of them ends up dead. Which I find very interesting. That's never really been tackled in any Batman story, which I'll get to later, but that's very interesting. Then the Joker's mostly ignoring him, playing cards, and he finds out that the guy there is actually someone posing for the Joker, and we cut to the Joker. He's buying this dilapidated amusement park. For what purposes, we're not sure yet, but we'll find out later. And he kills the guy there. Move on to Batman discussing how he barely knows the Joker after all these times they've fought, which I found very interesting. And then after that, cut to Barbara and Commissioner Gordon, which he has a scrapbook, which I also think is kind of cool. It ties the Joker into the very first issue of Batman with the cover and saying that the guy on there was the Joker or the active chemical worker, which I thought was pretty cool. I didn't know that they were going to go all the way back to that to inform this story, but I thought it was very cool just to sort of see that sort of angle brought to it, that the Joker is sort of, even without Batman knowing, has sort of just been with him this whole time since almost his very beginnings, which I think is a thing that's sort of tackled in Tim Burton's movies to a degree, but not fully realized. So after that, she opens up the door, Barbara, and gets shot by the Joker. Commissioner Gordon gets kidnapped. He wakes up. He's tied up. And Barbara explains the situation about what happened. And Joker tries to drive him at this amusement park that he purchased so that he can make him go through this tunnel that has a bunch of blown up pictures of his daughter. His daughter's shot through the spine and undressed in certain pictures, in an effort to try and drive him crazy and prove a point. After that, Batman gets in there, releases Gordon from his prison, and also he asks Gordon. Gordon is traumatized, but he's still sane after this. He tells him to bring him in by the book because he wants to teach him that their way works, which I thought was very cool, that Gordon, even after all this, still wants that way to be done, to show Joker that he was wrong, that he failed. And Joker, of course, tries to flee into the funhouse and goes through a speech about one bad day and tries to infer that Batman had one bad day. This ends with the final confrontation and Batman once again, for the last time, trying to reason with him to stop what he's doing, and the Joker just says it's too late, and it ends on him telling a joke, Batman laughing for a moment, and then it's sort of ending ambiguously on Batman smiling and grabbing a laughing Joker in the rain, and that's the end of the story. So I guess I'll just move on to the pros. Okay, the pros. So, first off, like I said earlier, there's a lot of influences on characterization in later works, in other media especially, and also very heavily in the comics. There's even references to it in later, especially like the video games, like Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. He starts telling the joke that starts telling the joke that he says at the end of the Killing Joke, but then he says, oh, you've already heard that one before, never mind, which I thought was cool. Also, Oracle is in the thing, which is also a reference to that story. I like the whole idea of one bad day. I think that's a very interesting idea, and it applies especially to Batman, because if it wasn't for that one bad day, he'd probably be a very different person today, whether he'd be a rich guy, just sort of, like if he'd really be the Bruce Wayne he pretends to be. What if he really was just a playboy and his parents never did die? It's just sort of fun thing about that, and it also implies that he might be a little bit crazy after that event. And really, if you think about it, a man dressing up as a bat, no matter which way you slice it, kind of is a little bit crazy. I mean, normal people don't go out and do stuff like that. You have to have something that happened in your life for you to take those steps to say that the law that is there is not good enough, that you have to step in and make a difference yourself because whoever's in charge is not doing what they're supposed to. Like I said before, the crippling of Barbara Gordon, and before I get to that, another influence in media that I forgot to mention if you've ever seen Birds of Prey, there is a scene in there. Of course, Birds of Prey includes Barbara Gordon, the crippled Barbara Gordon after the events of Killing Joke, and they even have a scene almost like identical to it. Mark Hamill voices the guy that plays him, and that's the first, I think, live-action adaptation of the Killing Joke story, at least official one, I think, which I thought was really cool how they used that for the series. And I might review that series later on. But anyway, back to this. Yeah, the crippling of Barbara Gordon. This was a one-shot story, and Alan Moore asked permission from Len Wein, I think the current editor, and he basically told him just to go ahead and do that. And I'm surprised that, knowing DC with their retcons, and it's been retconned now with the New 52, but I'm surprised how long they went with that, how long they went with the crippling of her and then her formation into Oracle later on. I'm surprised that DC went that direction. Usually they retcon stuff like that, which I thought it was just interesting that they chose to stick with that for such a long period of time before the New 52 came out. There are, like I said earlier, there are callbacks to previous Batman works through images and dialogue. Like Gordon mentioning the first guy that he busted might have been the Joker, like where sort of, I don't know if it says those exact words, but I think it's sort of, you can infer that that's what he's talking about. And it also shows the image on the very first Batman cover, which I think was Detective Comics. Yeah, again, I like that it gives the Joker a sympathetic, if not confirmed, backstory. I always like when they don't give him a set backstory, because that's sort of, if you give him a set backstory, that doesn't make him as interesting of a character. You just sort of know where he came from, and there's not that sort of creepy layer of mystery of where did this guy come from. Is what he's telling you the truth or just another lie he made up just on the spot? Which I always liked about that character. The joke at the end. I like that at the end of the story, Batman and Joker laugh. I think it's kind of an odd ending, but I think it's also very cool, too, at the same time. And that Batman would actually laugh at one of the Joker's jokes, which never happens in this story, which I thought was kind of cool. I like that Batman, this is not really done in the comics that much since then, but I like that he tries to reason with the Joker and tells him that eventually one of them is going to kill the other one, and you could kind of foresee that going the way Joker and him go at it. Like, he wouldn't really have to have that speech with any other person but the Joker. The Joker, one day, he feels like he's going to go too far to the point where he might kill him, or the other way around. The artwork in this is particularly good. Brian Boland, I don't think, at least I'm not aware, that he does that many stories anymore. He mostly just sticks to covers, and his artwork is beautiful. I, of course, got the deluxe edition, so I can't say much for the quality of the artwork in the other editions, where it's that bright, sort of unfittingly cheery, not cheery, but just sort of, the color doesn't really fit. It's too bright and just neon looking and in your face. It doesn't fit with the serious tone of the story at all, which is part of what I like about the deluxe edition. That it has a more realistic color palette, that it's a little bit more muted, 'cause it's a more and a somber artwork, because it's a more serious, sort of sad, realistic story, so it would need something like that. It wouldn't have the bright, flashy colors of like the old 60s comics or something like that. I also find it very interesting that this is one of Moore's least favorite works that he wrote. And I think that's more of just, like, I write too, and there's some books, not books, but there's some stories that I've written that I look back on and I say, wow, that could have been a lot better. In fact, I do that with most of my stuff. Like, I say, wow, there's a lot of flaws in this. Even some of my videos I look back on like that. It's just, I think mainly with him, it's just he's being more critical of his old works, just like people tend to do with stuff that they've previously worked on. Yeah, so I think that this book, like I said earlier, was groundbreaking at the time, and it influenced the characterization of the Joker from that point on, and it sort of changed the way the Joker was. He became more sadistic after this point, like even reflecting his murdering of Jason Todd after that point. Joker was really busy that year, but anyway, I guess that's pretty much it for the pros. I guess I'll go to the cons. If I were to think of one thing, really, is that I'm trying to think of one thing that just doesn't really line up with the story or doesn't really make sense with the story. I think that maybe they have like little trolls or something like that. Something in the book that like they're supposed to be midgets, but they look almost demonic. I mean, that's not it. It's un-PC, really. Like, it's unpolitically correct, and it just seems sort of like it feels almost like, I know the rest of them are, the rest of the people they worked with anyway in this are like carnies and everything, but that just feels kind of like insensitive, I guess. And that's really the only thing I can think of, and people have complained about that. Really, that's all I can think of, actually. For the cons, this book is kind of short, actually. It's just sort of, again, it's a one-shot, so it's not like really long. It's just sort of from point A to point B. It gets its point across without lagging too much, basically. So, before I rate this, if you're listening to this right now and you are interested in buying this book, I'd suggest that you buy the deluxe edition. The deluxe edition is really good. Like I said earlier, the colors are really good. They fit the story. They have like this somber tone to them, and I like the black and whites in them with the subtle bits of red added in. I really thought that was really cool. And oh yeah, before I forget, there are mentions again of previous stories like Red Hood and how that was the Joker's alias before he became Joker. But in this, it's explained that the crooks tell him one thing. They say that we do this so that the guy that does it never gets caught, and so it's a different guy every time. Really, it's to put the blame on him, and this backfires on him later when there's a shootout and Batman nearly captures him. And another sad thing I thought about this is that the guys in this, it's really unrelated, but they kill his wife, and he's sort of forced to go through. He doesn't know that they kill his wife, but he's sort of forced to go through that, even though he doesn't want to, because initially he's struggling, like in his previous life. He's really struggling to try and keep his life together after being an engineer and then trying to do comedy and no one liking him, which I thought was really, really cool, really reminiscent of the character that he becomes later on, because the Joker's sense of comedy, no one gets it besides him. It only makes sense and is funny to him in his demented mind, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, get the deluxe edition if you're going to buy any of them. The artwork really looks great in a more somber, serious tone. And I like the introduction and just sort of the quote-unquote special features in it, like them talking about about how it came to be, and also like there's a bonus story in there. It doesn't really tie into the previous one, but it's sort of, I think Brian Bowen wrote it and drew it. And it's okay. I won't be really reviewing that one since it doesn't have anything to do with the story. So yeah, just buy the deluxe edition. I don't really know that much about the original one because the coloring looks really terrible on it. So yeah, if I were to rate this on a scale of 1 to 5, I would give it a 4.9, which is almost a 5. It's really, really good, which means that it's really, really good, and it's an enjoyable story. It changed the Joker's characterization from that point on. It's serious. It examines things in the past and ties them to things that are happening now in the story. And yeah, it's a good story overall. It's short, simple, and just really examines the characters of Batman and the Joker and sheds a new light on them that we've never that people up to that point in time had never really seen before. Okay, I guess that's pretty much it. I might do another review soon. I'm not 100% on that though. If I do another review, I'll probably do a review on Batman The Long Halloween. I know I talk about that a lot, so look forward to that next time. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks for the support you've been giving me, and the comments, and especially the subscriptions, and the views and everything. You guys are awesome. Have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed this review.